In this video, I'm going to try to explain why Kamala Harris lost and also what could be the future trajectory for politics on the left in the United States. And I'll make 32 points altogether. Number one, Harris-Walz could have won. The outcome was not preordained. Number two, the trajectory of the polling suggests that Harris-Walz blew a substantial lead in early September. Early September was the time, this is number three, that Harris turned decisively away from any suggestion that she would pursue populism and change as contrasted with Biden. Number four, hiring of the Biden campaign staff was a critical error, as was relying on the counsel of her brother-in-law, Tony West, the chief counsel of Uber, a firm that specifically preys on loose labor market regulation and failing public transit. Number five, Harris is asserting at first that she was just a continuation of the Biden administration and then belatedly claiming that she wasn't, was just one example of an indecisive self-presentation that communicated pandering and inauthenticity. Number six, Harris's flirtation in later September and thereafter with billionaires and billionaire-friendly messaging went against the populist trend in the U.S. over the last 10 years. Number seven, Harris's unwarranted embrace of the Cheney neoconservative dynasty and of the lethality of the U.S. military during the convention speech that she gave were unprovoked political own goals against an overall popular sentiment against war and war-related spending. Number eight, Trump's incompetent response to the COVID-19 pandemic enabled the politically inept Joe Biden to win in 2020. Otherwise, Trump would have most likely won a second term. Number nine, particularly Biden, but also Harris, seem to have misattributed their own administration's 2020 win to talents that they had rather than to a temporary deviation due to the pandemic away from the anti-establishment trend of the last decade or so of U.S. politics. Number 10, Harris campaigned as if she was caught between courting a donor class and then sending out occasional half-hearted or phony-sounding messages that were directed at voters and their concerns. Number 11, Harris backed off some of her popular policies and positioning, like Medicare expansion, and seemingly to shield the donor class plus Republicans from a potential but never realized withering takedown, which she should have done, or oppositional positioning and policy proposals from her campaign. Number 12, the gentle on Republican stance that Harris inherited is typical of the entire Democratic Party establishment, including Nancy Pelosi, who wished on a number of occasions for a strong GOP as opposed to her perhaps wishing for a strong majoritarian Democratic Party. Number 13, as with the general strategic orientation of the Democratic Party establishment, Harris seemed to voters to be most intent on courting never Trump or moderate Republican voters, if they ever existed, or if they existed now, and suburban white women. Number 14, the Dem establishment love affair with moderate Republicans fits with Democrats' good cop of oligarchy role, as they seem to uplift and support the bad cop Republicans and save the Republicans from their errors and just craziness. Number 15, the courtship of moderates would be a return to form for Harris, whose K-Hive was and is a vocal cheering squad for Harris that consisted mostly of white upper middle class, corporate-friendly women. Number 16, Harris seemed temporarily during the campaign to overcome her historic, arch, upper-class, condescending vocal tone that apparently appealed to the K-Hive. Yet this vocal mannerism returned at times during the campaign. She sounds like self-satisfied, like a cat that ate the cream, rather that repelled angry voters, some of whom were from the working class. Number 17, Harris's race and sex were clearly disadvantaging factors to some voters, but they weren't the absolute barrier to her potential victory. This is an excuse that corporate Democrats are pushing out, that in fact it's because of her race and sex that she lost. Number 18, Harris presented herself as largely empty of core, consistent convictions, which matched her wandering ideological twists during her political career, in spite of the constant fact that she has been a public servant for all of her career. Number 19, demographic shifts of the 2024 electorate toward Trump were largely the product of Democratic Party failures, most notably by Joe Biden and Harris, and not from any strategic genius by Trump and his campaign. Number 20, continued failure by the Democratic Party leadership threatens to solidify those demographic shifts, for instance, among Latino young voters and male voters, into a durable Republican majority, but this hasn't happened yet. Number 21, Harris, for instance, a former prosecutor, could have presented herself as consistently standing up for rule of law for everybody, including the powerful, and holding the powerful to account. This stance would have put her on a collision course with the Biden administration and with the donor class as regards especially humanitarian law, with Zionists, and with the Israel lobby. Number 22, Harris's embrace of Zionist talking points, including the unsubstantiated claims of mass sexual violence on October the 7th, increased her unfavorability with key voting blocs and demobilized the activist base that might have helped her win. Number 23, Harris thus tied herself to the monstrous Middle East policy of Joe Biden, including the well-publicized genocide of the Palestinian people, to be seen in graphic detail for anyone with a social media account. Number 24, the Harris campaign went out of its way to insult and demean members of the Arab American community in seemingly inexplicable errors of political judgment that go beyond a Middle East policy shift. Number 25, while a decisive break with Biden would have been a moral and politically most desirable thing to do, it was within her grasp to win with no change in her misguided Middle East stances. Number 26, the overall political ineptitude of the leadership class of the Democratic Party has been thus exposed, whatever exact policy suite you might favor. Number 27, the most attractive to me policy orientation remains an economically populist and social democratic policy portfolio that supports ordinary people, both of the working class and small business founders and owners. Number 28, my use of the word social democratic rather than democratic socialist favored by Bernie Sanders is a recognition that there are positive contributions made by entrepreneurs as well as by workers to the overall economy, and Americans also admire entrepreneurs. Diminishing the excess power and excess profits of owners of capital and founders of enterprises in democracies must be considered a universal problem for all, not just a class conflict problem. Number 29, the Democratic Party establishment, however, including Barack Obama, has been unified since 2015 in trying to prevent a social democratic policy orientation to emerge, most notably embodied in Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, who essentially was a Roosevelt Democrat, a social democrat in his policy, and still is. Number 30, the Democratic Party establishment is fatally dependent on and representative of the donor class oligarchic elite, as is the Republican Party. Number 31, the Democratic Party is also fatally riddled by leadership of and dominance by the politically incompetent political consultant subclass, who make 15% off all of the big ad buys and must make itself independent of both oligarchs and political consultant groups to be a political success. Number 32, the Democratic Party remains committed to its good cop of corporate oligarchic role, as I've outlined in a 2020 blog post series at New Economic Perspectives and in this YouTube video on my Politics 2100 channel.